All right, Aquarius. I've spent 3 or 4 more hours, probably 4 more hours, getting prepared for my third video in the moral load, moral cognition series here on YouTube. So, I am combining many different things together. Before I get into the introduction, I just want to briefly bring up, if I can find the key card. There it is. All right, so I am combining many different things together. I'm going to bring up Aquarius as well briefly, just so you know what you're getting yourself into. So, with these archetypes, the 12 personality types, I am combining many different things together. All right, so first I am talking about, so this key card in the corner is considered the ego astro-psychologically. So you've got the ruling planets of Saturn, Uranus for Aquarius, Neptune and Mercury in exaltation, Sun in left field, and Pluto in fall for the Aquarius. For the INTJ, psychologically, you have introverted intuition hero, extroverted thinking parent, introverted feeling child, and extroverted sensing inferior. So I combine astrology and psychology. Now in this video series on YouTube, I am talking about the entire masculine through feminine overall energy of the archetype. So I've went through a video series ranking all of the personality types based on the overall masculine and feminine. And then the second axis I am working with is moral load bearing. So we are talking about how all of the personalities hold consequences, their conscience, what are they holding through, and what are they allowed to hold? What can they hold really through their nervous system? So we're talking about the inner and outer masculine and feminine in the third axis with containment in the nervous system and what happens under pressure, what happens when a personality hits something they cannot figure out. So we're running it through the overall masculine and feminine, moral load bearing, and the nervous system containment through the inner and outer masculine and feminine. All right. So I literally wanted to run through that briefly so you know what you're getting yourself into before I get into the introduction. So this video, I will be breaking down the child development stages through the inner and outer masculine and feminine of the archetype. So that's 1 year old all the way up to 30. And then I want to expand out on 30 years old and above, how to integrate Aquarius's inner and outer masculine through childhood, through adolescence, and 30 years old and beyond. So I wasn't going to do a third video, but I am an Aquarian or INTJ Mercury 11th house. So this is my mind, this is my thinking and communication. All right, so Aquarius is one of the most accurate archetypes in the entire system, and still one of the most misaligned in real life. And that's the part nobody explains. Because the issue with Aquarius is not intelligence. It is the eldest of the air signs, and it is an intellectual. Although they are very abstract, they're still thinking in systems. Because the issue with Aquarius is not intelligence, it's not awareness, it's not depth, it is timing. Aquarius understands things too early, defines them too fast, and acts too late. And because of that, it can be completely right about reality and still miss it. So in this video, I'm going to show you exactly where that happens in the system, how it develops across your life, and why correcting the sequence, not the intelligence, is what actually fixes everything. So if you're an Aquarius or you know one, be honest. Do you feel like you understand people better than they understand themselves, but still feel slightly out of sync with them in real time? Do you wait because you're precise or because you don't trust acting before you fully understand? And at what point do you usually realize you were right? Before it happens, while it is happening, or after it's already too late to act on it? All right, so my name is Heather with Underwater Panther. And in this video, we are continuing the Aquarius deep dive in the moral load bearing series. But this is the part where everything stops being theoretical and starts becoming lived. Because up until this point, we've done something very important. We built the architecture, we mapped the system, we broke down the three core axes the masculine to feminine orientation, moral load bearing, and the inner and outer masculine and feminine quadrants. So you could see where Aquarius sits, what it carries, and how its internal structure is organized under pressure. And then in the last video, we went even deeper. We moved inside the system. We walked quadrant by quadrant and showed how Aquarius actually processes reality, how its distortion order forms, why it begins an inner feminine pattern recognition instead of external perception, and how that one shift changes everything downstream, from how it defines reality to how it connects, to why its action tends to come late. So if you look at my key card I made 8 or 9 years ago, I have updated my key cards to include the inner and outer masculine and feminine. That is represented by IF, inner feminine quadrant, IM, inner masculine quadrant with T, parent, Neptune, and Mercury. The inner feminine starts with introverted intuition, hero, Saturn, and Uranus. The outer masculine is introverted feeling child and sun in left field quadrant. And then we have the outer masculine with Pluto and extroverted sensing inferior. That's the quadrant of the outer masculine. The distortion order is also notated on the key card. So we do have a universal integrated order that we run through, but life isn't perfect and we tend to go through a distorted order. And so that's inner feminine, inner masculine, outer feminine, and outer masculine for Aquarius. I will bring up a key card for that later. Okay, so let me go through this briefly because I just feel like it and I love listening to it back. All right, so let me adjust some things on here. I feel like making this bigger. So we're going to go through this briefly just for a recap of what we've already been talking about. But that's all right. Just in case you missed it. All right, so Aquarius. All right, so I just want to recap quickly on the archetype. I need to just scoot over and make it easier on myself. It's ridiculous. All right. I work a full shift and then I come home and prepare for my lectures for several hours and then I record. I try to get about an hour and a half kicked out. I have been learning new jobs at work, like 5 new jobs within a day. My mind is a little fried. I'm an Aquarian, so I like routine to a degree. I like to be efficient. I take pride in my work. I have a hardcore work ethic, and learning so many new things in one day is absolute chaos, but here we are. I was going to go to sleep, but I was like, you know what? This is too much fun. We're doing it. All right, so just a briefing over the whole archetype, Aquarius or INTJ. All right, so Aquarius's system is a survival distortion order. So they perceive, structure, or define, value, and detach, and then engage late. So that is the distortion order. regulates through pattern recognition, systems thinking, and conceptual mapping. Aquarius does not begin with external perception, it begins with internal pattern recognition and structure behind reality first. So, inner feminine, we have NI Hero, Saturn, and Uranus. This quadrant represents pattern recognition, trajectory tracking, and system awareness. Where is this going? Aquarius sees trajectories early and understands systems beneath reality, lives in pattern space. It perceives the abstract before it fully perceives the actual. NI Hero perceives patterns across time, compresses complexity into singular trajectories, sees outcomes before events fully unfold, and I removes noise and locks onto inevitability. Saturn represents structure, time, and pressure, grounds perception in reality constraints, adds consequence awareness and long-term weight. So Aquarius is a future-oriented personality type. So they live in the future, not in the present or the past. Their mind is always in the future. All right, so Saturn adds consequence awareness and long term weight. Ask what actually holds over time. Saturn stabilizes NI so it doesn't drift into fantasy. Uranus represents disruption, innovation, and system override. Detects where systems are outdated or inefficient, introduces sudden insight and paradigm shifts, rejects inherited structure in favor of better architecture. Uranus breaks systems so NI can rebuild them. Aquarius perceives systems beneath events, trajectories beneath behavior, and patterns beneath emotion. It does not scan the room first, it scans the pattern field. So Aquarius does not lack perception, it misplaces perception internally before external contact. And then we have the inner masculine quadrant with extroverted thinking parent, Neptune, and Mercury in exaltation. This quadrant represents structural logic, system building, meaning architecture. Once the pattern is seen, Aquarius immediately defines it. Aquarius defines systems logically, builds frameworks, and applies structure to insight. It does not just understand reality, it builds a model that explains how reality works. Distortion begins when this definition forms before reality has been fully received. So, TE, parent, represents organizing reality into functional systems, prioritizes efficiency, execution, and external structure. Ask what works in reality. TE converts insight into usable structure. Mercury exalted processes, articulates, and translates complex information, enhances clarity, precision, and system communication, allows abstraction to be explained cleanly. Mercury gives Aquarius high level articulation of systems. Neptune in exaltation represents expanding perception into symbolic, abstract, and conceptual meaning, dissolves rigid boundaries between ideas, open-minded, allows to a degree. It is so fascinating. Aquariuses are like open-minded. They're open to learning and talking, but once they do their own research, it's like they can become pretty fixed. Like, I want you to prove me wrong. Like, do more research than I have, sift through tons and tons of information, like reading and listening verbally, and then prove me wrong and we can have a debate. I love it. I love intellectual stimulation. Totally open to it, but also change my mind. All right, so Neptune allows Aquarius to connect systems across domains. Neptune gives Aquarius visionary synthesis. Aquarius builds frameworks, defines meaning, organizes abstract insight into coherent systems. It does not just understand reality, it builds a model of reality. All right, so the distortion point, Aquarius often defines reality before reality has fully arrived. The structure is accurate systematically, incomplete relationally. So then we move into the outer feminine with FI child and sun in left field. All right, so this quadrant represents internal values expressed outward through selective emotional visibility. Aquarius does not use outer feminine to understand the field first. It uses it to reveal where it stands after the system is already formed. Values are real, but relational connection can feel delayed, contained, or positional rather than adaptive. And then FI child forms internal values and emotional truth, prioritizes authenticity and personal alignment. Ask, does this feel true to me? FI is sincere but not always externally adaptive. Sun represents identity and expression, projects identity outward, expresses personal stance and individuality, seeks to be seen as aligned with internal truth. Sun gives FI visibility and identity projection. Aquarius expresses values after defining systems, shares perspective rather than absorbing others, connects through truth expression, not attunement. So connection becomes selective, positional, and delayed. Others experience distance being interpreted instead of felt. Outer masculine quadrant is extroverted, sensing inferior, and Pluto in fall. So this quadrant represents real world action, embodied engagement, immediate execution, and consequence delivery. This is the weakest and most delayed layer. Aquarius fears acting on incomplete reality more than it fears missing the moment. So action is often postponed until internal clarity feels sufficient. From the outside, this can look like hesitation, absence, or delay. Internally, Aquarius is still refining the system. So SE engages directly with present moment reality, requires responsiveness, immediacy, and physical action. Ask what is happening right now. This is where Aquarius struggles the most. Pluto in fall represents Pluto governs power, control, and raw consequence. In fall, discomfort with force, intensity, and domination, as well as authority. I'm certainly power dynamics, very acutely aware of power dynamics, and certainly does not like authority is a problem. Question all authority. Question everything, the Aquarian way. All right, so difficulty holding or applying pressure in real time. Pluto weakens Aquarius's relationship to impact and force. Aquarius delays action, avoids premature engagement, struggles with immediacy. Aquarius fears acting on incomplete reality more than it fears missing the moment. So it refines, analyzes, and waits. So from the outside, it looks like hesitation, absence, and inaction. Internally, clarity, readiness, and completion. So Aquarius's distortion order is inner feminine, inner masculine, outer feminine, and then outer masculine late. All right, so I feel better. I feel better now that we went over that. All right, so I will leave this up here later when we are breaking down the developmental stages. Can you see all of that? I like the other one. Okay. Boy, I hope my microphone's working. I've been so out of it with microphone checks. Okay, so now I feel better that we did a really good overview of Aquarius. What the heck is going on this channel? All right. All right. Cool. All right. So at this point, you understand the mechanism. You understand the structure. You understand the pattern. But there's one layer that we didn't address that can leave the system incomplete. And this is the part that most frameworks miss entirely. Because it's not enough to know how something works, you have to understand how it develops over time in the body, through the nervous system, across actual lived experience. Because Aquarius does not just have different structure, it has different developmental sequence. And if you don't see that sequence across time, childhood, adolescence, early adulthood, and then later reintegration, you will misunderstand both its strengths and its distortions. You'll think it's detached when it's actually early resolving. You'll think Aquarius is slow when actually they're over refining. You'll think Aquarius lacks emotional depth when in reality, it delayed relational integration. So, what we're doing in this video is adding the missing dimension: time based embodiment, nervous system progression across ages, and what each quadrant actually looks like when it's lived, not just defined. So, because right now you know how the system operates, but you need to see how the system becomes itself, and more importantly, how it corrects itself. Because Aquarius does not break in obvious ways, it misaligns subtly. Aquarius understands before it experiences. It defines before it fully receives. It resolves before reality is actually complete. And those are not intellectual problems, those are sequencing problems. All right, so we're going to walk through Aquarius across the lifespan. We're going to look at what happens in early childhood when inner feminine pattern recognition comes online first, what happens in later development when inner masculine begins structuring reality too early, how outer feminine shows up late as selective expression instead of adaptive connection, and why outer masculine action becomes the final and often weakest layer of the system. But we're not stopping there, because the most important part of this entire framework is not understanding distortion, it's understanding reintegration. So we're also going to break down what happens after 30. When Aquarius starts to see, not intellectually, but experientially, where the gaps are, where relationships don't fully land, where timing didn't align, where understanding didn't translate into impact, and how the system begins to reorganize itself, not by becoming something else, but by correcting the order in which it moves. Because this is the truth about Aquarius. Aquarius does not need more intelligence. It does not need more depth. It does not need more awareness. It needs sequencing. All right, so before we get into these stages, the parenting layer and the reintegration process, we need to ground one thing first. Actually, I'm not going to get into that right now. What am I at? 30 minutes? Okay. So I have a lot here. All right. We're going to power through. All right, we're going to power through. Got rain here. It's like 4:20 a.m. in the morning, actually. That's hilarious. I liked on a video from what's his name? Ross. Trapmore Ross. I liked on a video, and it was the 420th video. Like, what? That's so funny. And now it's 4:20 a.m. in the morning. I ain't even playing. Ah, why did that come up? Oh, I missed it. I don't know why. I didn't mean to show you that information. Jeez, I'm not going to edit that out either. That's all right. I totally missed it. That's what I was trying to show you, but I missed it by a minute. Yeah, that just happened. All right. So, anyways, all right. So, we're going to start with early childhood, 0 or 1 to 7 years old. So, Aquarius starts in the inner feminine. NI, Saturn, and Uranus. So in early childhood, Aquarius does not enter reality the way most children do. I don't think I can handle. I really don't think I can handle this playlist. I made a station out of one song, and that was I can't do it. So I'm going to pull up my favorite playlist that I've been playing for the last probably 4 years. I just keep adding to the same playlist. Why can I not think? Oh, it's called Fire. Fire, where are you? Gosh darn, it's been a night. Fire songs. All right, I gotta get in my Fire playlist. I need to get a vibe going here. All right, this is good. Rob Bailey and the Hustle Standard, for y'all that know. I body built for 15 years of my life, hardcore, extremely competitive, also for fun, but yeah, I still listen to Rob Bailey. Was a big, huge Dana Lynn Bailey fan back in my day. I just loved their dynamics, creativity, all of it. All right. So in early childhood, Aquarius does not enter reality the way most children do. So we're talking about the inner feminine quadrant. It does not begin by reaching outward, testing the environment, or learning primarily through interaction. Instead, Aquarius pulls reality inward almost immediately, and that shift, while subtle on the surface, changes the entire developmental sequence. Where most children anchor perception in the external world first and then gradually processes it internally, Aquarius compresses that order. Experience is not explored and then understood, it is absorbed and translated at the same time. This is where inner feminine becomes the dominant entry point, but it does not show up as emotional immersion in the way people typically expect. This is not a child primarily asking how something feels. This is a child absorbing pattern. The internal question is not emotional, it is structural. Without having the language for it yet, the child is already tracking what something belongs to, where it fits, and what it leads to. Experience is not isolated, it is immediately connected to trajectory. Introverted intuition begins compressing reality into direction almost instantly. It links moments together, forming continuity rather than treating events as separate. Saturn then stabilizes those patterns, reinforcing what appears consistent and building an internal sense of reliability. Uranus simultaneously scans for disruption, noticing when something breaks pattern or does not align with what was expected. Together, these create a system that is not just aware, but actively mapping reality from the inside out. So, y'all, I have had this business card for a long, long time. I don't know, 12 years. Map out your higher potential. Architecture is my favorite word. Mapping systems on systems, combining systems. Y'all, Aquarius, through and through. All right, so together, these create a system that is not just aware, but actively mapping reality from the inside out. This is why Aquarius children often feel older than they are, not emotionally, but structurally. So they are the eldest of the air signs, and they are a finisher type. So what they start, they finish. They are pretty mature, honestly. I mean, yeah, quirky, odd, intelligent. They just, yeah, certainly feel older than they are, not emotionally, but structurally. So that's definitely a Saturn thing. Capricorn is the same way. People rely on Capricorn a lot. High moral load bearer. Aquarius isn't a moral load bearer, but there's still pressure there for sure. So Aquarius, they are detaching inconsistencies in tone, behavior, and environment long before they can articulate what they are noticing. They may appear quiet, observant, or even distant, but internally there is constant processing. So just because someone is not talking a whole lot does not mean that they are not smart. Just because you're asked a question and you delay answering does not mean that your energy and your mind, your mental energy does not mean it is low. Normally, the quiet ones are the ones you need to watch out for. So, yeah, you need to be worried when the introverts come out in full force. All right, so Aquarius is not disengaged. They are already interpreting. They do not need external validation to confirm what is happening because they're forming an internal reference system very early. This creates real strengths that show up quickly. There is early pattern recognition, early independence in thinking, and an inability and a ability to detect when something does not align beneath the surface. There is a kind of quiet intelligence that does not need to be expressed to be present. The child can sense what is off before anyone else names it, and often before anyone else even notices it. But the distortion begins at the same point as the strength. Because perception is pulled inward so quickly, the child does not fully develop trust in external reality as something to stay inside of. Instead of allowing experience to fully land, the system translated almost immediately. What is happening is replaced by what it means. The moment is shortened, the experience is compressed. So instead of simply registering this is happening, the system moves straight to this is what this means or this is where this is going. That shift is not wrong, but it is early. When meaning forms before full reception, detail is lost, nuance is skipped. The child is no longer inside the experience, it is already beyond it. Over time, this creates a subtle but important gap between reality and perception. Always an outer body experience. From the outside, this can look like detachment or being in their own world. But what is actually happening is early resolution. The child is not absent. It has already processed the moment internally and moved forward before the moment has fully completed externally. Presence gets replaced with pattern, and that becomes the difficult way of interacting with reality. This is why parenting at this stage has to be precise. The issue is not that the child lacks emotional capacity, so forcing emotional expression will not solve the problem. So I hear a lot with Aquarian, ISTJ, and I'm sorry, Capricorn, ISTJ, Aquarius, INTJ. These children are not emotionally expressive by any stretch of the imagination. My best friend from high school actually reached out to me to go through her child's birth chart, and I realized that she was Capricorn ego, had a lot of Capricorn Aquarian energy, and immediately I was like, "Ah, okay. Y'all are gonna be all right." She's just not emotionally expressive. She is very masculine. That is what's happening. So, it's very apparent in women, I think. Capricorn men and Aquarian men, they're very masculine. It's natural. But when you're a woman and you're an Aquarius or Capricorn, being that masculine, it just throws people off. I'll put it that way. All right. So, this is why parenting at this stage has to be precise. So, the issue is not that the child lacks emotional capacity. So, forcing emotional expression will not solve the problem. In many cases, it will either be bypassed or performed without real integration. The real need is not more emotion, it is more grounding in perception. It is more grounded perception. What stabilizes the system is consistency in the external environment. So, yes, Aquarian children can look aloof. They're very introverted. They are probably reading, what do you call those? Britannicas. I sat there and read dictionaries as a child. I didn't speak very much. I read and 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 I read. Processing tons and tons of information. I've been this way my entire life. So, to other people, it comes off as detached, aloof, very detached, emotionally detached, relationally detached. But that's okay. So, just it's so imperative to understand what is going on. All right, so the child needs reality to be predictable, clear, and reliable enough that it does not feel the need to immediately abstract it. So, chaos. Chaos makes high minded, anxious people in the moment more anxious. When the environment is chaotic or inconsistent, the system will retreat even further into internal patterning because that becomes the only stable reference point. So the goal is not to pull the child out of its internal world, but to make the external world safe enough to stay in it. That means slowing moments down, bringing attention back to what is actually happening, and helping the child remain in direct experience before translating it. Simple grounding questions like, what do you see? What just happened? Or what is here right now? helps anchor awareness back into reality without forcing interpretation. Over time, this builds something Aquarius does not naturally prioritize early on: the ability to stay present without immediately resolving. It increases tolerance for raw experience without needing to close the loop. And that changes everything, because when perception is allowed to fully land before it is compressed into meaning, the patterns that form later are more accurate, more complete, and more connected to reality itself. The goal is never to remove the child's pattern recognition. This is the foundation of its strength. The goal is to sequence it correctly, to allow reality to be experienced before it is understood. Because when that order stabilizes, Aquarius does not lose its ability to see the system, it gains the ability to actively live inside it. Yes. All right, so now I'm going to add real life parenting examples and how this actually shows up in the child. So, when what this looks like in real life is often easy to miss if you don't know what you're looking at, because the child is not loud about it. It is not chaotic. It is not necessarily reactive in obvious ways. Instead, it shows up in small, consistent patterns of behavior that reveal how the child is processing reality internally before it ever engages externally. So you may notice that the child watches before participating. In group settings, instead of jumping in immediately, it stands back and observes. It tracks what other children are doing, how they are interacting, what patterns are forming in the environment. Excuse me. By the time the child joins, they already understand the dynamic. This is not shyness, it is pre processing. The child is not hesitant, it is mapping the system before entering it. So you may also notice moments where the child seems to jump ahead in understanding. For example, you explain something simple and the child responds with a conclusion that feels more advanced than what was said. It has already taken what you gave and extended it forward into what it believes will happen next. It is not just hearing you. I keep saying it. Like he, she, it, I don't know what. Like they. I'll just say they, cuz like I don't know, male, female, I don't know. All right, so they're not just hearing you, they're projecting beyond you. This can look like intelligence, but it is also early pattern completion. Another common example is when something small changes in the environment and the child reacts in a way that seems disproportionate or oddly specific. The child may notice a change in tone between two adults, a shift in routine, or an inconsistency in what was previously predictable. Even if no one explains, the child senses that something is off. It may not be able to verbalize why, but internally, the child has already detected a break in pattern. This is Uranus scanning for disruption, layered on top of Saturn's expectation of consistency. So you may also see that this in how the child asks questions. Instead of asking what this is, the child asks the child may ask questions that imply sequence or outcome, like what happens next or why did that happen. So rather than asking what this is, they ask what happens next and why did this happen. So the child is not just engaging with the moment, it is trying to place the moment inside a larger structure. The curiosity is not about the object or event itself, but how it fits into a system. There are also quieter signs. The child may seem content playing alone, not because they don't want connection, but because they internally are already engaged. The child can entertain itself through internal processing, through imagining patterns, through organizing what it has already observed. I keep saying it. I'm sorry, that's how I worded it. So, this can be mistaken for independence in the traditional sense, but it is actually internal immersion. At times, you may notice the child seeming mentally elsewhere, even while physically present. You may call their name and they take a moment to respond, not because they are ignoring you, but because they have already moved ahead internally. They process the moment and continue the pattern before returning to the present interaction. There is always a delayed reaction. Yes, absolutely. It's so funny how like there's so many different, yes, there's always going to be a delayed response. That is just a thing. It is such a thing. So this is one of the clearest signs that presence is being replaced by pattern. All right, so you may also notice that when something happens, the child explains rather than simply reacting. Instead of staying in the experience, they translate it. For example, if something breaks, instead of expressing frustration first, they may immediately start explaining why it broke or what caused it. The system moves to meaning before fully experiencing the event. From a parenting perspective, the key is recognizing that none of these behaviors are problems. They are signs of a system that is working exactly as it was designed to, but too early in sequence. The goal is not to correct the child, but to support the part of the sequence that is being skipped. So, for example, when the child is observing instead of participating, you do not force immediate interaction. Instead, you gently anchor them in the present moment. You may say, "What are you noticing right now?" Or "What are you doing?" This brings awareness back to direct perception instead of silent patterning without disrupting the child's natural process. When the child jumps ahead in understanding, instead of reinforcing the conclusion immediately, you slow down. You can respond with, "Yes, that could happen, but what is happening right now?" This helps separate present reality from projected meaning and trains the system to hold both without collapsing them into one. When the child detects something off in the environment, you validate the perception without immediately explaining it away. You may say, "You noticed something changed," rather than rushing to correct or dismiss it. This builds trust in perception while keeping it grounded in what is actually observable, rather than letting it spiral into an internal interpretation. When the child begins explaining instead of experiencing, you bring them back into the moment. Instead of engaging the explanation first, you might say, "What just happened?" or "What did you see?" This shifts the system from meaning back to reality, allowing the experience to fully land before it is analyzed. Consistency in the environment becomes one of the most important stabilizing factors. Predictable routines, clear communication, and steady responses reduces the need for the child to over rely on internal patterning for stability. The more reliable reality feels externally, the less pressure there is to create stability internally through abstraction. Over time, these small interventions build something Aquarius does not naturally develop early on. Why am I still sitting like this? I thought I still had my key card. I'm sorry. I've been working for like 14 hours at this point. Okay, I thought my key card was still up there. Why is my key card not? I'm so sorry. I thought I had my key card up there. I've been blabbling on. All right, I'm going to leave this up here. Yeah, okay. Goodness gracious. I don't know where I'm gonna put it. Okay, so I literally thought that that was there. That's why I was like leaning way over. I bet that looked funny as all get out. All right, I'm gonna make that a little smaller. I feel like, actually, you know what? Hold on a second. That was ridiculous. Ridiculously kind of hilarious, honestly. All right, so I think the best antidote to all of this is to have humor. Keep humor, keep it light. I don't know where I'm gonna put this cursed thing. It just doesn't quite line up. All right, so I'm gonna go over here actually. I do this in every video. Okay, so all right, there. Now we've got all of it. I've got to click on the OBS drives me absolutely nuts. All right, so I'm going to leave this up on the screen so you just have that as a reference. Hopefully by this point you've watched my other videos so you kind of know what's going on. All right, so hopefully that's visually good enough. I am exhausted and I probably still have another half hour to go. Okay, so anyways, consistency in the environment becomes one of the most important stabilizing factors. Predictable routines, clear communication, and steady responses reduce the need for the child to over rely on internal patterning for stability. All right, so over time, I already said that. Over time, these small interventions build something Aquarius does not naturally develop early on: the ability to stay inside reality long enough for it to fully register. The child learns that it does not have to leave the moment to understand it. They can remain present and still be accurate. And this is the entire goal at this stage: not to change how the child sees, but to change when it sees. Because when Aquarius learns to experience reality before translating it, the patterns it forms later are not just intelligent, they are aligned with what is actually happening, not just what they predict. All right, so now we're going to move into late childhood, early teens. I'm still not satisfied. All right, there we go. It's more visually pleasing. All right, so we're talking about late childhood and early teens. So intermasculine development. All right, so we are in the intermasculine quadrant with TE, Mercury, and Neptune. So this does line up psychologically. Psychological arena would say NI hero is developed between ages 1 and 12, TE parent 12 through 20, FI child 20 to 30 or so, SE inferior 35. So that's what the psychological arena talk about throughout child lifelong development, I should say. All right, so as Aquarius moves into later childhood and early adolescence, the system naturally processes into its next dominant phase. It begins to define. The patterns that were absorbed earlier are no longer just held internally. They're now organized, structured, and explained. What was once intuitive and implicit becomes explicit. The system is no longer just perceiving reality, it is actively building a framework to make sense of it. This is where inner masculine activates early and with significant strength. Extroverted thinking begins constructing systems out of the patterns that introverted intuition has already identified. Mercury steps in to articulate those systems, giving language to what was previously internal and abstract. Neptune expands the structures into broader meaning, connecting ideas into something larger, more conceptual, and often more philosophical than the immediate environment itself. At this stage, Aquarius becomes visibly advanced. The intelligence that was previously internal now starts to show externally. The child is no longer just seeing patterns, it is explaining them. It can connect ideas across different areas with ease. They can organize information quickly and efficiently. They begin forming internal consistent models of reality that feel complete and stable. There is a growing ability to synthesize information, to see how separate pieces fit together, and to create a structured understanding of how things work. This is where confidence begins to form, but it is very specific kind of confidence. It is not grounded in interaction or external validation. It is grounded in internal coherence. So I do want to pause because psychological people say that extroverted thinking parent is all about credentials, about reputation, about it's like very ambitious, entrepreneurial, wants to be their own boss. Um so yeah, it's different with external validation. It's like they don't really need external validation when it comes to the more of like the intellectual realm. I don't know. I'm still kind of sorting this out. Like I care it's very back and forth. Like Saturn and Uranus like energy because I don't care. Like I work so hard on my intellectualism. Like I work really hard on studying and, combining cross-referencing. I am constantly cross-referencing information. Tons and tons of information, regardless of what realm, cross-referencing. So I take a ton of time to form my thinking. I pride myself in my thinking. But not externally. It's more of an internal thing. Like I cater my communication to the level of what someone is at. So, like, I let someone open up for a bit first and see where they are spiritually, intellectually, emotionally, and then I will keep it at that level. You know what I'm saying? So, it's like I don't really care to brag or no, like I thrive in being the odd man out. Anyways, just a side note. All right, so they are grounded in internal coherence. The system trusts itself because what it builds makes sense to it. The logic holds internally, and that creates a sense of certainty. However, this confidence is forming without full relational or environmental calibration because outer feminine connection and attunement has not yet been fully developed or integrated. That distinction is critical because what is being built is structurally strong, but not fully tested against reality in real time. The system feels complete internally, even when it's still missing data externally. And because of that, the strengths that emerge here are significant, but they come with very specific risk. So the strengths are undeniable. There is high level thinking, an ability to build and organize systems, strong conceptual intelligence, and early awareness of abstract or philosophical ideas. Aquarius at this stage can appear far ahead of their peers intellectually. They can explain things clearly, see connections others miss, and create frameworks that feel both logical and innovative. But the weaknesses form alongside those strengths because the system moves into definition so quickly. It begins forming conclusions before all relevant data has been received. Logic can become a way to stabilize uncertainty rather than a tool that emerges after full perception and processing. Reality is defined before it has been fully experienced. And because connection is still underdeveloped, there's often difficulty updating beliefs through real time interaction with others. This creates a subtle rigidity, fixed modality, not because the system cannot change, but because it has already resolved internally before external input has had a chance to fully land. So the child may feel certain, and in many ways they are, but that certainty is built on a data set that is still incomplete. And because it feels complete, it is less likely to seek additional input unless prompted. This is why parenting or guidance at this stage requires a very different approach than most people instinctively take. The goal is not to teach Aquarius how to think. It already knows how to think, and it is often doing so at a high level. Trying to impose more structure or more logic will not create growth here. It will reinforce what is already overdeveloped. The actual goal is to introduce calibration to help the system test what it thinks against reality, not just refine it internally. This means creating feedback loops. It means gently but consistently challenging conclusions, not to invalidate them, but to expand them. Questions become the most effective tool at this stage, not corrections. So, what did you miss? Invites the system to look for gaps instead of defending its structure. What didn't you account for? Open space for additional variables. What changes if you include this? Encourages flexibility without dismantling the framework that has already been built. These kind open-ended questions is the key. Open-ended questions. All right, so these kinds of interventions do not attack their system, they refine it. They teach Aquarius that definition is not a one time event. It is an evolving process that improves with more data, more perspective, and more interaction with reality as it actually unfolds. Because the goal here is to not weaken the inner masculine, it is to prevent it from locking too early. It is to keep the system open just long enough for more reality to enter before meaning is finalized. So when that happens, these structures Aquarius builds does not lose strength, they gain accuracy. They become more adaptable, more responsive, and more aligned. I feel like my I don't know. All right, getting distracted. All right, so the goal here is not to weaken the inner masculine. It is to prevent it from locking too early. It is to keep the system open just long enough for more reality to enter before meaning is finalized. When this happens, the structures Aquarius builds does not lose strength, they gain more accuracy. They become more adaptable, more responsive, and more aligned with the world outside of their own system, not just the world inside it. All right, so let's talk about real life examples. Clear behavioral examples and how to respond as a parent or reparenting yourself, even. All right, so what this stage looks like in real life is much easier to identify than early childhood, because the internal system is now being expressed outwardly, extroverted thinking outward. The child is no longer just observing and absorbing with introverted intuition. It is explaining, organizing, and forming conclusions about what they have already seen. So this is where they pop off at the mouth, TE, extroverted thinking. So you may notice that the child starts correcting things more often. They may point out inconsistencies in rules, systems, or logic, not emotionally, but matter of factly. If something doesn't make sense, they will say so. If instructions feel inefficient or contradictory, they will question them. This is not defiance, it is structural analysis becoming external. So you may also see this in school settings. The child may excel in subjects that require systems thinking, pattern recognition, or conceptual understanding, but struggle with tasks that require step by step compliance without explanation. Do as I say, not as I do. I'm just playing. Who reads the rules? It does not want to just follow directions. So they do not just want to follow directions. They want to understand why the directions exist. If they see a more efficient way to do something, they may ignore the given method entirely and substitute with their own. I literally did that at work today. Someone tried to tell me how to do something, and they had no idea how much experience I had. And I just kind of let people be who they are, and I will listen to them and then just totally do it my way and do it even better. And they're like, oh, okay, that's cool. Anyways, efficiency. From the outside, this can look like non-compliance, but internally it is optimization. Another common example is how the child explains things to others. They may take a simple concept and expand it into a larger framework, connecting it to the other ideas or systems. They don't just answer questions, they build models. You may hear them saying things like, well, that's because, followed by an explanation that goes beyond what was asked. This is Mercury articulating what NI has already mapped, with Neptune expanding into something broader. The child is not just learning information, they are reorganizing it into something internally coherent. So, talking out loud is a huge thing as well. I talk out loud all the freaking time. I consider it a sign of intelligence, thinking out loud. Totally fine sorting through and organizing your thoughts. Like, hello, who doesn't? All right, so you may also notice that once the child forms an understanding, they become resistant to changing with changing it unless there is a clear reason to do so. So they are not stubborn in an emotional sense. They are stable in a structural sense. The conclusion they have reached feels complete, so they do not instinctively look for additional input. If you challenge them directly, they may defend their logic, not aggressively, but confidently. From their perspective, it is not arguing, it is maintaining coherence. There can also be moments where the child appears dismissive of input that feels less structured or less logically grounded. If another child or adult presents something emotionally or vaguely, Aquarius may not engage with them fully because it does not fit into a clear framework. So, this can create subtle social friction. The child is not trying to disconnect, they simply prioritize what makes sense over what feels relational. Another pattern you may observe is over explaining. When asked a question, the child may provide more information than necessary, building out the full structure instead of giving a simple response. Man. Yeah, that one really, really actually lands hard. Like, if you are an Aquarius right now and you talk to a Scorpio or ENFP, they're going to ask you a question, and all they want is a yes or no, and you expand contextually. That is going to drive them nuts. Or actually, I would say also Sagittarius. Scorpio and Sagittarius. It is quite annoying to both of them how Aquarius expands and expands rather than simple yes or no. I would say Sagittarius because they're very witty and in the moment and they're like, yes or no, let's go. Come on. Like, you know what I mean? And I'm just sitting here like, there's a lot around that, so let's talk about it. So, anyway, so much. So when asked a question, the child may provide more information than necessary, building out the full structure instead of giving a simple response. I do that every single day. So, this is not about showing off, it is about completing the system. They feel more stable to explain it feels more stable to explain the whole than to leave parts implied, giving context because it matters. From a parenting standpoint, this is where most people make a critical mistake. They either try to shut this down by enforcing authority without explanation, or they over reward it by treating the child as advanced without introducing any correction. Both approaches create imbalance. If you shut them down, the child retreats further into its internal system and stops sharing their thinking. If you over reward them, the system becomes rigid and overconfident in its own structure. The correct approach is calibration. You meet the child's intelligence without collapsing to it. When presented When they present a conclusion, you don't immediately confirm or deny. You expand. You introduce variables they haven't considered. You might say, that makes sense. What happens if this changes? Or that works here, but would it work in a different situation? This keeps the system open-ended questions without invalidating, without dismissing, open-ended questions without dismissing. When the child corrects something or questions a rule, instead of responding with authority alone, you give structure to your response. You explain the reasoning behind the rule, and then you allow space for the child to respond to that reasoning. This teaches the system that external structures also have logic, not just their internal one. They begin to see that reality is not something they define alone, but something they interact with. So if the child becomes overly certain, you introduce gentle friction, not confrontation, but expansion. You ask questions that impose the limits of their current framework without attacking the framework itself. What would change your mind is a powerful question at this stage. It forces the system to recognize that its model, while coherent, is still open to revision. So, what would change your mind? In social situations, instead of telling the child to just listen or be more considerate, you translate relational dynamics into structure. You might explain, when you respond like that, they don't feel included in the conversation, helping the child see that connection has its own system and impact. Aquarius will not respond to emotional pressure, but they will respond to understanding cause and effect. Over time, these interactions teach something critical. They show the child that its internal system is not wrong, but it is not complete on its own. That external input is not a threat to their thinking, it is an expansion of it. And that definition is not a fixed point, it is something that evolves as more reality is included. This keeps inner masculine from locking too early. It allows the system to remain strong but flexible, structured but responsive. And when that balance is maintained, Aquarius does not lose their ability to build powerful frameworks. They build frameworks that actually hold up in reality, not just in theory. All right, so now we're going to move into adolescence with the outer feminine, development with FI child and sun. All right, so as Aquarius moves into adolescence, the system reaches a phase it has delayed up until this point, connection. All right, you know what? I'm actually going to, I don't know if you like if I keep this key card up here or not. I kind of always reference it. It is kind of nice to have it on the screen. I'm just going to leave it up there. All right. As Aquarius moves into adolescence, the system reaches a phase it has delayed up until this point, connection. I know, start vomiting now. It's okay. I understand. All right. But because this layer comes online later than it naturally should, it does not function in the same way it does for most people. Connection is no longer used as a tool for perception. It is no longer how the system gathers information about reality. Instead, it becomes a vehicle for expression. By the time Aquarius arrives here, the internal sequence has already moved through pattern recognition and structural definition. The system has already perceived, already organized, and already formed meaning. So when it finally turns outward towards others, it is not looking to understand what is happening. It is revealing what what they have already concluded. So what is this quadrant has already concluded. This is where introverted feeling becomes visible. The individual becomes aware of what they feel, what they value, and where they stand. There is a strong sense of internal identity that does not need to be negotiated in real time. The person knows what matters to them, and that knowing is not easily influenced by external pressure. But because this develops after internal perception and definition, it does not naturally adapt to the moment they are in. So I keep saying it. They do not naturally adapt to the moment they are in. So connection becomes selective rather than responsive. They take the form of self revelation rather than mutual discovery. The underlying message becomes clear. This is who I am. This is what I believe. This is what matters to me. But what is often missing is the complementary movement towards the other person. The ability to adjust, attune, or meet someone where they are without losing internal stability. Bum, bum, bum. This creates a very distinct presence. There is authenticity, but it is contained. There is emotional truth, but it is not always interactive. The individual is not performing or shaping themselves to fit the environment, which can be a significant strength. There is resistance to social pressure, resistance to inauthenticity, and a refusal to compromise internal values for external acceptance. The identity that forms here is real and it is stable, but the distortion emerges in the relational space because connection is being used for expression rather than perception. There's difficulty attuning to others in real time. Emotional presence can feel inconsistent, not because the individual does not feel, but because they are not continuously tracking the emotional field around them. This can lead to feeling misunderstood, even when the person is being clear. It can also lead to being perceived as distant, rigid, or selectively engaged, especially in environments that expect reciprocal emotional interaction. There is a gap here, and it is subtle but significant. Aquarius is expressing what is true internally, but they are not receiving what is true externally. So while the individual feels authentic, the interaction itself can feel slightly misaligned, not incorrect, but incomplete. This is why guidance at this stage requires restraint rather than control. Attempting to force conformity or override identity will not create integration. It will create a much larger rebel. It will create resistance. Aquarius does not, it'll create a rebel without a cause. Aquarius does not respond to pressure by adapting. They withdraw further into their own internal system. So the goal is not to shape the identity, but to expand how that identity relates to others. This means introducing relational awareness without threatening internal stability. The individual needs, excuse me, to see that connection is not the loss of self, but the expansion of perception. That adapting to another person does not mean abandoning what is true internally. It means allowing more reality to be included before responding. This is best done through modeling rather than instruction. Aquarius will reject direct control, but will stay coherent. They pay attention to what works, what aligns, and what creates clarity in real interactions. So when they see attunement functioning efficiently, oops. So when they see attunement functioning effectively, when they see someone listening, adjusting, and still remaining grounded, they begin to understand that connection can exist without distortion. Over time, this allows outer feminine to shift from selective expression into something more balanced. They do not lose their strength and identity. They do not become performative or overly adaptive. Instead, they gain the ability to include others in the process of understanding, not just in the result of it. So, when that happens, Aquarius does not lose their sense of self and connection. They become more accurate within it. My throat's starting to get all scratchy. I apologize. So, what this stage looks like in real life is often misunderstood because from the outside, it can appear like confidence, independence, or even emotional maturity, when what is actually happening is a very specific kind of relational asymmetry. The adolescence is no longer just thinking internally. They are now expressing who they are, but they are doing it from a position that has already been formed before the interaction even begins. You may notice that the teenager becomes very clear about their preferences, beliefs, and identity markers. They might become highly selective about who they spend time with, what they engage in, and what they reject. They're not easily swayed by peer pressure. In many cases, they may even resist it entirely. If something does not align with their internal values, they simply opt out. This can look like strong self possession, and in many ways it is, but it is also a sign that connection is being filtered through preformed identity rather than shaping identity in real time. Conversations at this stage often follow a distinct pattern. Instead of entering a dialogue to explore, the adolescent may enter with a position already established. They may share what they think, what they believe, or how they see something very clearly, but show less interest in adjusting that position based on the interaction itself. You may hear statements that feel definitive rather than exploratory. It is not that they are unwilling to listen. It is that listening is not yet functioning as a primary way of learning. Expression is. You may also notice inconsistency in emotional presence. There can be moments where the adolescent is surprisingly open, honest, and clear about how they feel, followed by periods where they seem withdrawn or uninterested in engaging emotionally at all. This is not instability in feeling, it is selectively in expression. They share when it aligns internally, not necessarily when the relational moment calls for it. In friendships or social dynamics, this can create a very specific pattern. The adolescent may form deep but limited connections, preferring a small number of people who align closely with their values rather than adapting across a wider social group. They may struggle in environments that require constant emotional reciprocity or rapid social adjustment. Other people might experience them as hard to read at first or as present but not fully engaged. Comments like, "You're distant," "You don't really open up," or "I don't know where I stand with you" can start to appear, even when the adolescent feels they're being completely authentic. Another common example is how they respond to emotional situations. If someone is upset, Aquarius may default to explaining, clarifying, or offering a perspective rather than immediately attuning to the emotional state. They are not ignoring the feeling, they are translating it. But to the other person, this can feel like a lack of empathy or presence, even when the intention is to help. From a parenting standpoint, this is where control will fail almost immediately. If you try to force the adolescent to be more emotionally expressive, more socially adaptive, or more open, it will often result in withdrawal or quiet resistance. Aquarius does not respond to pressure by conforming. They respond by reinforcing their internal boundaries. The more they feel pushed, the more they will retreat into self definition. The more effective approach is to expand relational awareness without challenging identity itself. When the adolescent expresses a belief or value, you do not argue directly. Instead, you bring attention to the relational impact of how it is expressed. You might say, I hear what you're saying. How do you think that landed for them? Or what do you think they experienced in that moment? This shifts the focus from being right to being aware without invalidating the original position. In emotional situations, instead of correcting their response, you model an alternative. If they move into explanation too quickly, you demonstrate what it looks like to sit in the moment first. You might say, before we figure this out, let's just stay with what's happening for a second. This shows that presence does not replace understanding, it precedes it. Over time, they begin to see that connection is not inefficient or unnecessary. It is a part of accurate perception. It is also helpful to gently highlight missed information, not as criticism, but as expansion. If they come to a conclusion about a person or situation, you can introduce another perspective without forcing agreement. That's one way to see it. What else could be true? Keeps the system open without destabilizing it. Aquarius does not need to be told they're wrong. They need to be shown that there is something more. Socially, you can support development by creating environments where interaction is structured but not forced. One-on-one conversations, smaller groups, or shared activities with clear context allow the adolescent to engage without feeling overwhelmed by constant emotional demand. In these spaces, they are more likely to experiment with attunement because it feels manageable and coherent. Over time, these small adjustments begin to close the gap between internal truth and external reality. The adolescent starts to recognize that connection is not something that happens after understanding. It is something that informs understanding. That listening does not weaken identity, it refines it. And that being present with another person does not require losing themselves. It requires including more than just themselves. When this shift begins, outer feminine becomes more balanced, expression remains clear and authentic, but it is no longer isolated. But they are no longer isolated. They become responsive as well as expressive. The individual does not lose their identity in connection, they gain accuracy with it. All right, so now we're going to move into the adulthood with outer masculine development 30, 35 plus with SE and Pluto. All right, inferior function and Pluto in fall. All right, so as Aquarius moves into adulthood, the system reaches its final layer, action. This is where everything that has been perceived, contained, and defined is meant to move outwardly into reality. But this is also where Aquarius experiences the most resistance because action requires something the system has not naturally trusted up to this point. It requires entering reality before it is fully resolved or understood. All right, so for Aquarius, this is the core tension. The system has been built on internal clarity. So they have learned to stabilize themselves through understanding, through pattern recognition, and through structural definition. So by the time they reach action, they do not want to move until everything makes sense. They want the system to feel complete before they engage externally. But reality does not operate that way. Reality is not something that waits for full understanding before requiring response. So, what develops instead is delay, not because of laziness and not because of a lack of capability, but because of precision, because schedules suck, time sucks. Yeah. Aquarius is not avoiding action. It is refining before acting. They're waiting for the internal structure to feel stable enough that the action will be correct. They want to minimize error before movement, and that creates a very specific pattern of behavior. The system becomes highly deliberate. When Aquarius does act, they often do it with intention and clarity. There's low impulsivity, strong control over when and how energy is applied, and the ability to execute in a way that is efficient and targeted. When alignment is present, the action can be high impact because it is backed by a fully developed internal framework. This is not chaotic movement, it is strategic. So they are known as the strategists. But the same mechanism that creates that strength also creates the primary weakness because waiting for clarity often means missing timing. Over refinement leads to hesitation. The system continues adjusting internally while reality is already moving externally. And as a result, action tends to happen late or only when pressure forces it. This creates a pattern where Aquarius may know exactly what needs to be done, but does not move until the moment has already shifted. Opportunities pass not because they were not seen, but because the system was still refining when it needed to be engaging. And over time, this creates frustration, not from lack of understanding, but from the gap between understanding and impact. Pluto adds another layer to this dynamic. There is an internal awareness of power, intensity, and consequence that runs beneath the surface. Aquarius understands, often very clearly, that action creates real effects. That once something is done, it cannot be undone in the same way. Once you open Pandora's box, there's no stuffing it back in. So there is a deeper level of caution, a sense that movement carries weight. But because this power is processed internally, it is not always expressed externally. The individual may feel the intensity of action internally while appearing passive or delayed externally. This creates a disconnect between internal capacity and external expression. So this creates a disconnect between internal capacity and external expression. So the system knows it can act, knows it has the ability to create impact, but hesitates to step into that role until it feels completely justified. And because complete certainty is rarely available in real time, action continues to be postponed. This is why guidance at this stage becomes very specific. The goal is not to push Aquarius into reckless behavior or to override their need for clarity. The goal is to normalize imperfect action, to shift the belief that action must follow full understanding, and replace it with the recognition that action is part of how understanding is formed. Aquarius has to learn that movement does not corrupt clarity, it refines it. That engaging with reality provides information that cannot be generated internally. That feedback from action is not a disruption to the system, but an essential part of completing it. This requires creating environments where action is safe to test, not just execute, where movement is allowed to be iterative, not final, where mistakes are not seen as failures of understanding, but as data that improves it. The system has to experience that it can act without losing structural integrity, that it can move without collapsing its internal framework. Because the deeper shift that has to occur is this: reality is not completed internally, it is completed through interaction. Understanding does not end in definition, it evolves through engagement. And until Aquarius allows action to become part of its process rather than the final step after perfection, it will continue to experience the same gap. But once that shift happens, everything changes. Action becomes integrated instead of delayed. Timing begins to align with understanding, and the system that once was contained internally begins to actually shape the external world in real time. Aquarius does not lose their precision when they learn to act sooner. They finally give that precision somewhere to land. All right, so I do want to break down Pluto a little bit more. It's a wild placement to have, Pluto in fall. All right, so Pluto is what turns Aquarius's delayed action into something that feels high stakes, all or nothing, and internally pressurized, even when nothing is happening externally. All right, so what Pluto adds to this stage is intensity that is not always visible on the surface, but is deeply active underneath. By the time Aquarius reaches the outer masculine, the system has already spent years perceiving, structuring, and defining internally. So when it finally approaches action, it does not experience action as simple movement. It experiences it as consequence. Every action feels like it carries weight, impact, and potential irreversible change, even when the situation itself is relatively low risk. You may notice the individual does not hesitate randomly. The hesitation is specific. It shows up most strongly in situations where the outcome feels undefined, where variables are still open, or where the action cannot be taken back once it is initiated. They may delay making decisions, not because they do not know what to do, but because they are still tracking downstream effects. Internally, they are running simulations. If this happens, then this follows, and then this changes. The system is trying to account for everything before it moves. This can show up in very practical ways. They may take a long time to start something new, even if they have already thought about it extensively. They may avoid committing to decisions until they feel certain they understand the full picture. They may hold back in moments that require quick engagement, even when they are capable, because the internal standard for action is extremely high. From the outside, this can look like procrastination or lack of initiative, but internally, it is risk management at a very deep level. There can also be a pattern of compressed action. Instead of acting gradually, the individual may wait, refine, and hold back, and then move all at once when the internal threshold is finally met. When they do act, it is often decisive and impactful, but the timing may feel late relative to the situation. Others may experience this as inconsistency, long periods of inaction followed by sudden, intense movement. Another way this shows up is in control dynamics. Because action feels tied to consequence, there can be an underlying desire to control the conditions before acting. They may try to stabilize variables, gather more information, or ensure that the environment is aligned before they engage. If they cannot establish that level of control, they may withdraw from the situation entirely rather than act within uncertainty. Pluto also creates sensitivity to power and impact. All right, so honestly, I'm going to take this down because I'm tired of staring at it myself and I want to see more pretty lights. And I'm going to do this. And probably cap this video off because I'm already at an hour and a half and I have many, many, many pages to go. All right, so Pluto also creates sensitivity to power and impact. The individual may be highly aware of how their actions affect others, but instead of expressing that awareness outwardly, it stays internal. They may hold back from speaking, initiating, or intervening because they are considering how it will land, how it will shift dynamics, or how it might escalate something unintentionally. This can lead to missed moments where action would have been beneficial, not harmful. From a guidance or parenting standpoint, this stage requires a very specific kind of support. The goal is to not push the individual into action through pressure because that will increase resistance and reinforce the need for internal control. Instead, the goal is to change the relationship to action itself. Action has to become something that is allowed to be imperfect, reversible, and informative. You introduce this by lowering the perceived cost of movement. You create environments where action does not carry permanent consequence. Small decisions, low stake risk, and iterative steps help the system experience action as a part of learning rather than as a final outcome. You may say this doesn't have to be right, it just has to move. Or let's try it and see what happens, reinforcing that action is not a commitment to a fixed result. It is also important to reflect back what is happening internally in a way that brings awareness without judgment. When you see hesitation, instead of labeling it as avoidance, you can say it seems like you're trying to make sure this is completely right before you move. This helps the individual recognize their own pattern without feeling misunderstood. Once that awareness is there, you can introduce a new frame. What would happen if you moved before it's fully resolved? Over time, this begins to loosen the grip of perfection and control. The individual starts to see that action does not destroy clarity, it creates it. That reality is not something that can be fully mapped internally before engagement. It is something that becomes clearer through engagement. This is the critical shift. Pluto does not go away. The awareness of consequence, impact, and depth remains. But instead of preventing action, it begins to inform it. The individual still moves carefully, but not immovably. They consider impact, but not at the cost of participation. They begin to understand that power is not just in holding back, it is in knowing when to step forward. And when this integrates, Aquarius no longer waits for the perfect moment to act. They become capable of entering reality while it's still unfolding and shaping it in real time. All right, so I think I've said I did want to break this down even more. All right, so I'm going to break this down even more. This is a very important quadrant to understand because it is the most difficult for Aquarius. All right, so what this stage looks like in real life is not a lack of ability to act, but a very specific relationship to action that is built on internal sequencing. By adulthood, Aquarius often knows exactly what needs to be done. The issue is not confusion, it is timing. The system has spent years refining perception and structure internally, so when it reaches action, it approaches it with a level of seriousness that other archetypes do not. Action is not just movement, it is consequence. You may see this in how long it takes the individual to initiate something, even when they already thought it through existentially. They may research, plan, and mentally simulate every angle of a situation before taking the first step. From the outside, it can look like overthinking or hesitation, but internally, it feels like responsibility. There is an awareness that once something is set in motion, it creates effects that cannot be fully undone. So the system tries to get it right before it begins. This becomes especially visible in major life decisions, career changes, relationships, relocations, where creative projects can take a long time to initiate, not because the person is unsure of what they want, but because they're trying to align every variable before committing. They're asking, often unconsciously, if I move here, what does that change next? And then what follows that? The system is tracking downstream impact before allowing present moment. In everyday situations, this can look like delayed responses. They may know what they want to say in a conversation, but take time to say it, editing internally before expressing. They may hesitate to step into opportunities unless they feel prepared, even when preparation is already sufficient. They may wait for the right moment to act, only to find that the moment has already passed or shifted. There is a pattern of internal completion without external execution. Aquarius may fully resolve something internally, understand it, define it, and feel clear about it without ever translating that clarity into action. From their perspective, the system is complete. From the outside, nothing has happened. This creates one of the most common external frustrations. You figured all of this out, but didn't do anything with it. Pluto intensifies this dynamic in a way that is easy to miss if you are only looking at behavior. Underneath the delay is not passivity, it is pressure. There is an internal awareness of power, impact, and irreversibility that makes action feel significant, even when the situation itself is relatively small. The individual is not just asking, what should I do? They're asking, what will this do? And those are very different questions. This can also create an all or nothing relationship with movement. Instead of acting in small increments, the individual may hold back entirely until they feel fully aligned, and then act in a way that is decisive and complete. So there's very little in between. Either the system is still refining or it is fully committing. This is why others may experience Aquarius as inconsistent, long periods of stillness followed by sudden high impact action. Power dynamics can also surface here. Aquarius may be highly aware of its own ability to influence situations, but reluctant to step into that role prematurely. It may hold back in leadership, confrontation, or decision moments because it is aware of how much those actions can shift things. This is not a lack of capability. It is a reluctance to apply force without fully understanding of its effects. So, from a guidance standpoint, this is where the intervention has to be extremely precise. If you push Aquarius to just act, it will feel like you are asking them to abandon their entire internal process. All right, so all right, so I think I went over quite a bit of this already. All right, so I'm going to go into adult reintegration. How many more pages do I have? All right, so I am almost done. Okay, I thought I had to cap this off, but I am almost done. So we are moving into uh well, I lost my page. Give me one moment. I apologize. Okay, where is it? This is a dang good song. Oh, maybe I do have a lot more than I thought. I didn't Alright, I didn't insert the page numbers on here, and I thought I almost got through the whole I almost got through the whole freaking document, and yeah. Alright, give me one moment. I did lose my spot. I do apologize. Oh, no. Alright, so how did I mess this up so hardcore? I must be, like hmm. Oh, okay. Alright, yeah, it is actually longer than I thought. Okay. Mhm. Alright, so how many pages do I have left? I feel like I've gone through 40 pages already. I'm exhausted. This is the longest I've ever struggled finding something. Alright, so, honestly, I think I'm gonna make this into its own video. Yeah, I'm almost at 2 hours. I need to go to sleep. So I'm going to oh, there, I finally found it. Are you kidding me? Page 27. Alright, so I do have 20, 30. Okay, I've got at least 15 to 20 pages to go. Alright, so I do have a lot more information than I thought. That happens every single time. Okay, so I'm going to cap this video off here. I think that was awesome, amazing. We went through 1 to 30, 35, through the development, childhood development, giving examples, parenting examples. Very, very important. I do want to do this for every single archetype, which I will go more in depth with every archetype at some point. This has been very challenging. This has been a very challenging series. So this has actually been the most challenging series I have ever done to date. So I'm working on a 700-page ebook currently. And yeah, it's amazing. I'm running a lot through each archetype and updating a decade worth of combining systems together. So, anyways, I super hope you enjoyed this video. My energy levels are completely plummeting right now. Feel free to leave your thoughts and comments in the uh, comment box below. I do have free ebooks. Actually, I will bring that up briefly because I spent all of last year. Uh-oh, am I still connected to the internet? Oh, okay, good. So I spent an entire year working on the Aquarius or INTJ personality. And yeah, so I've done a lot of work here. So let me bring this up. I do have free ebooks. All right, what did I name it? Okay, there it is. Okay, so I do have free ebooks available. Okay. All right. So Aquarius or INTJ. So these are the free ebooks I have available on my website, available for download immediately. Aquarius INTJ Toxic and Healthy Masculinity and Femininity Introduction. Aquarius Keeping a Purposeful Life. Aquarius Boundaries Architecture. Aquarius Cognitive Triggers and Planetary Triggers. So I am giving the first 11 people a free download of these ebooks. They are absolutely beautiful, visually very pleasing. These are probably my favorite visual books that I have visually. So yeah, definitely check those out. I'll put them in the description box and the comment box. Note to self, put this in the comment section for the other two Aquarian moral load videos. All right, so I also have an Aquarius or INTJ emotional mastery guidebook. That is probably top 3 book that I have ever created. All right, so I also have the Aquarius INTJ wealth guidebook, nervous system reset guidebook, and my master the Aquarian or INTJ archetype, an in-depth astro-psychological analysis ebook. That is breaking down the key card in depth. And so, but it's not adding the inner and outer masculine and feminine. It is not adding the overall masculine and feminine, and it is not adding moral load. So, the three axes I'm working with now in this series, those books do not have this information, but it's very, very, very foundational. So you have to start somewhere. I know this lecture series, whatever presentation series, is very, very dense information, very dense information. So if you want to take a step back and learn the planetary and cognitive functions better, highly, highly suggest that you check out my master Aquarian archetype and in-depth astro-psychological analysis ebook, as well as my free ebook. So, anyways, check that out. I have written 35 books at this point in my life, and I plan on writing probably 35 plus more. So, lifelong goal. Is there anything else I wanted to mention? I do have an Aquarius or INTJ playlist here on YouTube. I have over 160 videos in it. So, as an Aquarian or INTJ mind, 11th house, I'm an Aries rising, 85% Capricorn ISTJ. So, yeah, this personality is very different, to say the least, and it can be frustrating understanding everyone else, every other system besides yourself. So, I feel your pain. I feel your pain and quirkiness. So, anyways, hopefully you like this video. Take care, y'all, and I will see you in the next video.